Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to come before you today and present the new version 2.1 release of the DE4000 software and firmware. There's been a lot of work that's come together to make all of this possible, and I just want to thank all those who were part of the DE4000 team who have all contributed to bring us to this point. As Dave mentioned, this is really exciting for us. We've had a lot of great deployments of the DE4000, and we've learned a lot as we've done so, and we've been able to expand and improve on the functionality of the DE4000, and a lot of that is evident in this version 2.1 release. And so today we'd like to share some of those new features and discuss some of the issues that we've been able to clear up. And also we'd like to introduce our new documentation system that we are debuting with the DE4000 2.1 release. Many of you may be familiar with Wikipedia or Wiki style document formatting, and that's what we've adopted for the DE4000 documentation moving forward. And so this new documentation is a Wiki style format, and essentially it's a live documentation system, meaning that we can update documents and those changes are immediately available on the Wiki site. That allows us to make this documentation much more fluid and dynamic. It will also allow us in the future to have more interactivity with our users. I'm sure you've all seen different platforms that have discussion groups or technical support wikis where people can present questions and other users can answer those questions, or our support teams can, also provide additional support. So those are some of the things that we'll be able to do down the road with this Wiki system. But what we'll have immediately available is all of our current documentation, all of our current manuals that are right now available on the Altronic LLC website. But those have been now reformatted into this new Wiki format, and you'll see how that allows you to browse between these documents dynamically without having to download and manage a bunch of external PDF files. As we move forward and have further releases, we'll be able to publish change logs, and we've published a change log for this 2.1 release. So that's going to outline the changes between the version 2.0 and version 2.1, so that you have somewhere where you can go and immediately see what are the new features, what are the bugs that have been fixed, and so that will make it much easier for you to have a common place to access that information as we move forward with future software releases. This new documentation system is debuting with the DE4000, but other products will follow and will be added to the Wiki system as we move forward, so that this becomes down the road the de facto method for us to distribute our documentation. one of the really nice features also is that although the documentation is presented in a web format that's viewable in your web browser, any wiki page can also be exported out as a PDF file and distributed that way. So if you need to have offline copies, they can be produced directly from the wiki documents. As mentioned, the gateway to get to the wiki documentation will be through our website, altronicllc.com. So if you visit that page and then click on the link that says products, you'll then come to the products section, and under instruments and controllers, you see that currently we have individual documents for the DE4000 operation and configuration manual, the scripting reference manual, and so on. When we take the wiki site live, which should be by tomorrow, in this area you'll see these individual documents replaced with a link that will take you directly to the wiki site where all the documentation will be available. So what I want to do at this time is show you what that wiki site is going to look like when you follow that link. So this is the Altronic documentation wiki. So this is the starting page. In the future, we'll have other topics besides documentation, but if you click documentation, that then takes you to the topic of DE4000 documentation. And if you click there, you see that we've got 4 documents currently available on the wiki regarding the DE4000. So we have the DE4000 installation manual. Let me just click into that. And what you see here is you have the content of the document, and then you also have just a moment here. Okay. You have a table of contents on the right-hand side, so you can easily scroll through the table of contents, and you can bring up, for example, we have the Modbus address list embedded in this document, so you can bring up the Modbus lists or whatever information you want from that table of contents. So it's very easy to navigate the document. And then at the top here, it's easy to see where you're at in the hierarchy of the wiki site. So I'm in the documents DE4000 section, and I'm viewing the DE4000 installed document, but I can go back a level by clicking here on DE4000, and I can then view the other documents. It's also very easy now for us to create links from one document to another document. So the installation manual may reference a section in the operator's manual, or the operator's manual might reference a section in the scripting manual, or the change log could reference an updated section of the operator's manual, for example. So we're really excited about the new capabilities and features that this new format gives us in regards to our documentation. It makes the documentation a more live, dynamic resource, as opposed to something that gets created at the release of a product and then doesn't really change as the product evolves. So, again, we've got the manual that you can go through just like before with the previous PDF document. But I think you'll find that this is a much easier format to work with. And then we have the scripting manual for anyone that's interested or is currently working with the Lua scripting system. We have a reference of all of our API calls and functions. Each of those has example code. So it's very easy to go in and just copy a chunk of script and then paste it into your application and use that. So this especially will get expanded as we move forward, so that we can provide more examples of how to do things with scripting. So instead of just giving you the basic scripting functions, what we want to do with this wiki site is give you concrete examples and say, if you're trying to do dynamic valve control with scripting, this is how you would do it. Or if you need to override a PID set point during certain stages of your startup sequence, and then later on in your startup sequence, remove that override and allow the PID function to take control. Those are the types of examples that we can provide in this document. And as I mentioned, as we make this more interactive moving forward, you can envision a system where you'll be able to post your questions directly in the wiki site, and then others can answer your questions, and it can become a community site, but also a direct avenue where we can provide support to you, and also that support information that we can provide is also made available to others, so that if they have a similar question in the future, it's already been addressed. So, and then finally we have the change log, and so this outlines all of the changes between version 2.0 and version 2.1, and each item is notated as to whether it's an addition of a new feature, or a bug or an issue that's been fixed, or a change that's been made. And then they're also broken up into various categories. So this is really where you would want to go to see what all the new features are in version 2.1. And I'll be outlining and showing some of the new features here as we go along. But this is where we have them all documented. So. Do we have any questions up to this point in regards to the documentation or the wiki format?
Where do we type in our questions if we had a question to ask?
Well, I apologize if I wasn't more clear. That we do not currently have an interactive question and answer section right now, but this wiki platform gives us the ability in the future to enable such a feature. So that's immediately available, but it's the type of functionality that we can enable using this wiki platform.
Is this going to change the manual view on the 4000 when you go to settings and try to view the manual? Is it just going to be the normal manual, or is it going to be kind of this wiki thing?
So we will embed the operation and configuration manual and I believe the installation manual is currently embedded as well. So those documents will be embedded. They will be snapshots at the time the software is released because we can't assume that the DE4000 has network connectivity. So we have to embed those documents as they exist at the time the release is published. It could be though that we could embed a link to the wiki version of the documents as well, so that if you were on a laptop or some device that did have internet connectivity, you would also have an option to go directly to this site and view the latest version of those documents. So I guess the answer is there will be an embedded fixed version of each document directly accessible in the DE4000 interface. And then in the future, we could provide links there as well to the wiki site. Okay. If there's no other questions in regards to the documentation, I want to take some time now and actually go into the DE4000 itself and review and share with you some of the new features that are available in the DE4000, and then we'll take some more time for questions after we've looked at that. So this is the DE4000 as it appears on a new install with a fresh configuration with really nothing configured. Starting off, I want to address some of the new user interface elements that we've added. As you know, the dashboard view is really the heart of the DE4000, and we have the ability to create multiple dashboard pages and customize those dashboard pages in order to group components in the way that you want to group them and arrange them in the order that makes sense to you. And we've been able to add some new component types that give us even more functionality in the dashboard view. So I want to review a couple of those right now. The first type, the first new dashboard element type that I want to address is the button or the toggle button, and I'm going to add that here in the middle of this dashboard page. And I'm going to select a virtual channel that's part of the system. It's called speed control. And speed control is a parameter that allows you to either put the system into automatic speed control, where the speed is determined based on some input channel, such as suction pressure and a range of set points, and we can do a linear control between those set points, or manual speed control, where you can set a manual value, either typing it into the screen, or you could have a potentiometer on the front of the panel that would be a voltage reference that would correlate to a given speed. But anyway, if we choose this virtual channel speed control and change the display element type to a toggle, then that becomes a button, and you can see that we can then click the button and it changes from one state to another. So it can change from auto to manual and vice versa. These toggle buttons can be created with multiple states, more than two states. So they can be used for toggling a value between on and off, or in this case, we can toggle between auto and manual. Yeah, but they could also toggle between three options. So you could have, control type 1, control type 2, control type 3, or three or four different parameters that you want to be able to toggle through using the button. So that's one of the new display elements that we've been able to use quite a bit and take advantage of in this new version. The other one I want to address is a combination of an input box and also up and down buttons integrated into a single control. And a good example for this would be if we're controlling manual speed. There's a virtual channel here called manual speed. That's part of our speed control page. And typically it would just display the value as a text box. But if I change that element type to our new up-down input element, it allows for two things. Number one, we can set an increment amount. So every time I click the up arrow, for example, it would increment that manual speed by 50. But you could change the increment amount. You could make it 10 or 25, whatever you want it to be. So every time I click up or down, I can increment or decrement the manual speed. But at the same time, I can also click on the numerical value itself and then put in whatever value I want. So I'm not limited to values that are, increments of 50. I can jump to any manual speed that I want to. And one nice thing is this integrates with the control strategy. So if you have limits set for the maximum or minimum speed, it's going to enforce those limits. But besides those limits, you can enter any value that you would like there for the manual speed. In the past, we've been able to add additional dashboard pages. So you just click the plus symbol to start a new dashboard page, and then add your elements to that new dashboard page. We've had cases where we had a limit of 7 dashboard pages, and we had people that were using every single bit of all 7 of those pages. So we've expanded that, and now you can have up to 10 dashboard pages. So that is a welcome addition with this new release. Something else that we've added, and I don't have a good example to show you at the moment, because it's more of a custom thing, but we have the ability now to create an entirely graphical dashboard page. And this does require some additional programming. So whether that's something that we would do or you would do with our guidance, and there may be, there's going to be development costs associated with that. But what we can do is we can create a graphical dashboard page that would show some type of process or some type of system and then those graphical elements can be interactive and dynamic. And where this really comes into play is when we expand into markets beyond gas compression, there may be applications for the DE4000 that don't fit our normal mode of operation and require new types of interface, or even with compression systems, maybe you're doing yard valve control and the customer wants to visually see the status of the yard valves as they open and close, or they want to be able to override those valve positions maybe by clicking on a symbol on the screen that represents a valve and opening or closing that valve. All of those types of things can be designed into a graphical dashboard page, and then that page can be added to all the other dashboard pages that are part of the system. So down the road, we'll have more examples of that type of application, but if something comes up and you need something along those lines, we can have those discussions as to what it would take to implement something like that. Before we were able to control two PIDs or configure two PIDs directly in the interface, but we had a lot of people that needed more than two PID loops running, and it was possible to add additional PIDs through scripting, but it was a little bit cumbersome. So now we're able to configure up to 10 PID loops. So it really opens up the possibilities of what we can do with the DE4000 with this latest release. I want to discuss the topic of new communication capabilities that are enabled with version 2.1. And so for this section, I apologize, it's just going to be me talking. There's not a whole lot to really show or demonstrate in regards to some of these new communication capabilities, but I want to talk about them and explain them. And then, again, if anyone has questions in regards to these new capabilities, we can discuss them. One of the new communication features that we've enabled is called MQTT. Some of you may be familiar with MQTT, but for some of you it may be a new communication protocol that you've not heard of. But I can assure you that as time goes on, you'll hear more and more about MQTT as it's becoming a de facto standard for inter-device communication, especially over large networks and across the internet or internal company intranets and so on. The concept of MQTT is based on a broker, which is similar to what we would often refer to as a server. But with MQTT, the broker is really just a middleman between an end device, such as the DE4000, and a consuming device, such as a SCADA system or a company database or a interactive dashboard panel, for example. So the way to best explain it is the DE4000 can act as a MQTT client, and it can publish its data. So as the DE4000 is operating, all of the channel data, all of the status data can be transmitted to the MQTT broker as part of a packet. And so all of this information is bundled up into a packet and published to the MQTT broker. What the broker does then is, as I said, it doesn't store the information, it doesn't do anything with the information, but it's able to pass that information on to anyone that is subscribed to that device or that channel. So you could have, if you just wanted to do data logging, you could have a data logging server subscribed to the broker that would then receive that information. So every time the DE4000 would publish a packet of MQTT information to the broker, then the broker would then forward that onto your database, and then you could store that data as a time series database of events. So you would have an event log or a time-based database of all of the DE4000 channels and status information over time. But you could have another client connected, or another process subscribed to the MQTT broker that could be implementing a live display. So you could have a display in a control center somewhere in Houston that's monitoring the live data that's coming from a DE4000 that's located in somewhere in Oklahoma. And so the DE4000 again would publish the exact same information to the broker, but then the subscriber would be taking that same information and displaying it graphically, for example. And so anyway, in some ways it's similar to what can be done with Modbus, but it's a little bit backward in terms of the DE4000 is actually just pushing out its information at a fixed frequency over this MQTT channel, and then whoever happens to be subscribed to that can receive that data and then choose what to do with the information. So we have implemented MQTT in this version 2.1 release. We do have some customers that have helped us to beta test this functionality, and it's so far working really well for them. They were able to implement a system where they can set limits for certain values, and if values exceed those limits, then email messages can go out to alert personnel, or if the system stops or is faulted for some condition, then those email alerts can go out and notify the proper personnel so that they can respond immediately to these remote locations that are typically unmanned. So that's all been implemented through MQTT. So anyone that has an interest or a need in regards to MQTT, you can contact us. We've even implemented a broker service that we can potentially deploy for you, but then ultimately the consumer side of it, which typically would be some existing infrastructure in the end user's SCADA system or IT system, would have to integrate with the broker that we would be able to provide. So anyway, as I said, it's a lot of talking and nothing really to look at, but that really is an exciting new capability that we have with this release. In terms of just standard Modbus communication, we've added Modbus TCP on top of the Modbus RTU that we had previously, and then we've also enabled bidirectional communication with either the Modbus TCP or the Modbus RTU. So now, in addition to being able to read values from the DE4000, we can now configure registers that can be written to, and this really gives us a lot of new capability in terms of being able to write to registers in the DE4000 and create handlers in our scripting language that can receive that data that's written to those registers and then take some kind of action based on the values that are written to that. So a lot of that functionality we've built into the system. So for example, all of the primary buttons that are part of the DE4000 interface, so the stop button, the reset button, the start button, even like the cancel timers button that's on the values page, those button presses can be implemented through Modbus writes. So that allows a remote system to stop the DE4000 or to cancel the timers, for example. It can even enable remote starting of the DE4000, but obviously, there needs to be the proper protections and things in place to make sure that that remote start functionality is only enabled when the system is safe and secure and everyone's out of harm's way. So, obviously you'd want to have lockout, tagout, and other types of procedures and some sort of a mechanism to indicate that it's safe for the system to be started remotely. But those types of things can be implemented with additional switches and locks and relays and so on that can be integrated into that system. But in addition to those button presses that can be implemented remotely, we also have the ability to lock a system out remotely. This might be helpful in the case of a lease package and the end user has failed to make payments on the and so over Modbus the system could be locked out and taken out of operation until the payments were restored. Just as off the top of my head example, but then the system could then be unlocked either remotely or by providing a passcode that someone could enter into the interface manually. Also along the line of Modbus functionality, we've now enabled 32-bit Modbus functionality. So whether it's large 32-bit integers, either signed or unsigned, or whether it's 32-bit floating point values, Obviously, those have to be implemented by combining two 16-bit registers into essentially a virtual 32-bit register. But we have support for both reading and writing to those 32-bit registers, either over Modbus TCP or Modbus RTU. There's a number of just minor issues that were annoyances that have been cleared up. We had some issues with the parameters page. Sometimes the parameters wouldn't store properly. We had some issues where if you would try to save the current configuration, there was an error message that would sometimes pop up that would say save failed. A number of issues like that have been corrected. We had a more major issue where certain systems, certain packages would shut down on an overspeed, even when the actual speed of the engine was within bounds. That issue's been corrected and resolved. So the overall stability and operation of the DE4000 has been greatly improved with this release. Many of you may have experienced issues where our 8-inch touchscreen display can be sluggish or sometimes non-responsive. We've been able to make great improvements with this version 2.1 release that has dramatically improved the responsiveness of that 8-inch touchscreen display. So that's a welcome improvement that everybody's happy with. We've also made the HMI elements to be more you can't see it on my screen that I'm sharing very well because it's so fast, because this is running on my desktop PC. But on the Touch HMI, when you touch a button, it will immediately display yellow, and then once the page refreshes, then the button changes to blue to show that's the active button. So the addition of that color feedback on the HMI has also improved the user experience, so that as you're selecting things or changing pages or interacting with the touch display, it's more apparent that you've actually touched it, because the last thing you want to do is second guess whether you've touched the screen hard enough or whether it's registered that touch event. So all of those changes have been integrated into version 2.1 and provide a much improved experience for those using the touch display. We've also added the ability for those that write scripts and create scripts. We can now initiate faults within the scripts, and we can also set a fault code that represents what the there's a new fault type indicator that can be set in that, and it's already enabled for our built-in fault conditions, but it can also be expanded for custom faults. And then those fault codes are also accessible over Modbus. So if you've implemented a new custom fault condition and the package goes down based on one of those custom faults, you can see over Modbus that the fault condition was number 23 or number 14 or whatever fault code you've assigned in your in the custom script, and then you can build a table on the other end to receive that Modbus and data, and then display the reason for the shutdown. So. Are there any questions out there?
Hi,
One of the
Brian. This is Shirali. Just a quick question. This 8-inch HMI capability all is repeating in the 15-inch HMI as well?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
See, we have two codes we are receiving from Ultronic right now, 8-inch standard display with a 15-inch HMI. So 15-inch HMI, it is a mimic of this one or it is a separate one?
The
So
15-inch.
I believe what he's asking, Brian, is when they get a 15-inch display, will be a mimic of this, which the answer will be yes, it'll be the same as this display. What you see, just larger.
Yes, so the new 15-inch displays, which are currently being tested and being released to some end users on a trial basis. The 15-inch display will show the same layout and the same format as the 8-inch. It will just display it on a larger screen so that it's easier to view, and the touch targets obviously are larger and easier to touch. Does that answer your question, or is there something else?
Yeah, that answers. So we are expecting the mimic one because of what are all the features what we are available in 8-inch, it should be there in 15-inch as well. That's it. You already answered that one. It is just a bigger.
Yes,
screen.
everything visually will look the same, just larger.
Other questions for Mr. Worth? Brian, one of the questions that has come in to me here is relative to the update to the virtual DE.
Yes, we will have a link back at the same Altronic LLC website. We'll have a link to the latest version of the virtual DE tool. So we're going to maintain the current virtual DE as it is now, but also have a new link to a 2.1 version of that virtual DE 4000 tool. And so that link will be available on the Altronic website when that gets updated, most likely by tomorrow.
Hey Brian, can you just touch on one thing? So this is going to be going out on all new product on an ECN, and we'll issue a notice of what serial number that hits on as we integrate into production, that this is going to come on all new units. But for anyone who wanted to upgrade, I believe there's an upgrade path. If you already have 2.1 that you've been using, obviously there's been preview releases for people that have had features and things we've tried to solve. But if you just had 2.0, could you just cover what that entails? It would be an update like you usually would, but I think there's things that would break. Is that correct?
Most likely, and Okay, so most likely the upgrade path from 2.0 or even pre 2.0 is mostly straightforward, but it doesn't hurt if you want to send your configuration file to us, and we can make sure that that is able to be converted to a 2.1 format, and that will just save you trying to do it, on site and then finding out that there's an issue where it doesn't carry over. So in most cases, you would be able to update from a 2.0 or pre 2.0 version directly to the 2.1 and reload the configuration. But if there's scripting involved or valve control or things like that, we may have to make some changes. So the best your best bet there is to work with someone internally here at Altronic directly in our engineering team, and have us help you evaluate what the implications may be of that update. In regards to the actual update process, the update is distributed as a single file, as a single zip file that is composed of 3 parts. The first part is the controller module firmware. The second part is the terminal module firmware. And then the third part is the update.atf file that's installed using a micro SD card. So if you have a system that's that needs updated to 2.1, you're going to need 2 things. You're going to need a micro SD card to insert into the SOM module and update all the software to 2.1, but you're also going to need the ST-Link programming tool so that you can update the firmware on the controller module and the terminal module. So all components have to be updated to the same 2.1 version. So you cannot update the software but leave the old firmware on the boards. They all have to be updated together. So all of our Altronic support personnel, our field personnel, number one, they all have the programming tools, but also they have the instructions as to how you can order that tool yourself if you need it, and how you can actually use that tool to update the firmware. And so, contact them if you need more information on either the tools or the procedure to perform those updates.
All right, folks, anything else for Mr. Worth? Mr. Trina? Going once, going twice. Covered a lot of ground here in the last hour. So as Brian said, we'll be the update will come to the website here within the next 24 hours or so here that will provide the necessary links to the new wiki. You will see more of the wiki going forward here as more and more of our documentation migrates to this model. I think those of you that have had experience using that and certainly will get some with this product, I think will be as impressed as we are here in terms of the speed by which we can keep them current and active and fresh, totally updated. So you'll expect to see more of that from us, certainly as we move forward. So that we will have a note that will come out in the next several days. It'll just sort of button up what you've heard here today relative to the wiki and relative to the availability of the firmware updates through our regional managers here. And as Brian said, certainly we are here to support any migration discussions or questions that you might have specific to an application. So certainly I think a significant step forward here in terms of not only raising the bar in terms of its existing capabilities, but certainly adding a whole lot of additional new functionality and capability along the way. So as you have come to expect from us, certainly this will not stop. We will continue to innovate on this product here and respond to customer requests and needs and operational requirements as they go forward. So this will certainly by no means be the last one of these calls.